Darkness is gathering, and in the gloom of twilight he finds himself wandering between the sideshows, the rides, the booths. He can't remember how or when he got here. He looks around, sees no one. Then he thinks he's mistaken as he sees movement in the narrow alley between two striped tents. But no, it's nothing but canvas moving gently in the breeze. Probably. His memory, he realizes, is shocking these days. He seems to get blackouts, great gaps where he can spend hours, the best part of a day, engaged in some activity which he then forgets. He feels he is losing chunks of his existence. Old age is drawing on as remorselessly as the night, he supposes. He glances around himself, trying to recall what thrills and delights he may have sampled. The waltzer? Not alone, surely. The same goes for the roller coaster, and the dodgems sparkling their static in the middle distance. Never go on a ride alone. It's the mark of sadness, failure, loss. If not the rides, then perhaps the shooting gallery? But that booth is unmanned, the rifles lying at all angles. The supposed prize is a tawdry handful of cuddly toys and such-like trash. He wouldn't have bothered with that, even if he had someone to win a prize for. Frustrated, he walks on, decides to circle the big wheel that lies in the heart of the fair. But surely he'll find something to jog his memory. Perhaps he'll even encounter someone he knows, someone who'll greet him by name. And then he will recall everything. A thought occurs to him. If he's bought tickets, he will have spent money. He checks in his jeans pockets to see how much cash he has left. He finds a few coins. A groat, a threepenny bit, a silver sixpence, a big brown penny. So much obsolete tender, collector's items, not currency. He almost misses a note, which he takes out and holds up to what remains of the light. The Queen looks distinctly cadaverous, so much so that he wonders if this can be a forgery. He turns it over, sees the image on the back. Still unsure, he puts on the smeared reading glasses that always sit slightly askew on his nose and checks more closely. The legend £3 sterling is certainly ornate. Could a forger make money from such an excellent copy? Seems real. Vaguely reassured, he shoves the cash back into his jeans and resumes his meandering orbit of the big wheel. He finally sees signs of life, a small crowd gathered in front of a garishly lit tent. Above the entrance the sign is half revealed in a few coloured bulbs. He can make out a word, wonders. That sets his heart beating a little faster. He walks to the back of the small clump of people. It never pays to be too forward. It's easy to see over their heads anyway. They're rather short, stunted even, huddled in dark clothes that seem too large for them. Roll up, shouts a square, beefy man in a yellow checked suit. He even wears a bowler hat and spats, so traditional is his ensemble. Roll up and see creatures half-human, subhuman, barely human. He feels uneasy. It is a little distasteful to hear this kind of thing. Inappropriate, tactless in this day and age. Perhaps he would be more offended if he were clearer as to what this day and age might be, though. As he worries about this, the barker steps forward to the edge of the platform, lowers his voice a little, as if speaking to a confidant. Prepare to meet one of the strange denizens of our little show, ladies and gentlemen. Gaze in awe at the loveliness of Zora, the tattooed lady. Behind the barker, the flap of the striped tent is thrown aside and a figure emerges. At first it's hard to make out anything but a woman shape that seems to absorb all light. As Zora emerges from the shadows, however, she enters the pool of lurid radiance cast from the sign above. He gasps, as she is lovely, graceful, sensuous, in a kind of silvery sequined bikini, her feet bare. However, he's also puzzled, as surely this woman has no tattoos. Her skin seems blue-black, though it's hard to be sure in this light. It occurs to him that perhaps she is indeed tattooed most extensively, but that the patterns simply don't show up against her deep pigmentation. If so, describing her as strange seems doubtful at best. Tinny music plays, a crackly recording of a small orchestra, cheesy 30s music that might be suited to an old jungle movie. Zora begins to dance and sway as the barker steps back, giving her room to cavort. She moves to the edge of the stage and starts to make come-hither gestures with her hands. He realizes that the small crowd has dispersed and he's standing there alone, watching a nearly naked woman writhe above him. He feels himself flush with embarrassment. "Don't be shy," she breathes, and her voice has just a trace of an accent he can't quite place. "A fine gentleman like yourself has nothing to fear." She leans over, her hands almost touching his face, and he sees that her palms are pale. He looks down and notices flashes of pink from the soles of her feet as she gyrates. Then he notices that, all over her body, she bears tiny blots and streaks of similar pinkness. All at once he grasps the truth. She is indeed the tattooed lady. Surely no one was ever so tattooed. As if reading his thoughts, she laughs, flutters her eyelids coquettishly. Her eyes are green, the lids that briefly mask them dark with ink. "Come," she breathes, and retreats a pace, 2 paces, still beckoning. "Come inside." "Yes, sir," the barker puts in, reminding him of the man's existence. "Come inside and see the Snake Girl of Kashmir, the Wolf Man of the Pyrenees, and the astonishing hermaphrodite mermaid of the Grand Banks. Come in and enjoy the show. Everyone's so keen to meet you." If the barker had not spoken, he feels he would have gone inside with her. But now he's wary, almost repelled by the vulgarity of it all. And with a twinge of shame, he also wonders if he has enough money to even afford admission. There's no price list on the placard by the entrance, only a picture of a stylized feminine face. The eyes are blank, whites devoid of irises. He steps back, despite the ardent protests of Zora and the yellow-suited man, and turns to leave. "Plenty of time later, sir," the barker shouts. "We close at midnight, remember." Idiot. He's not entirely sure who the idiot is. Possibly all of them. But he is ashamed, confused, and still baffled as to why he's here. Perhaps he should go home. If only he could remember where he lives. In the past, he can recall, he has been as confused as this. But never before when sober. He's been walking blindly, determined to keep his back to the Wonders tent until he gets out of earshot of the barker. Now he stops and takes stock of his surroundings. There are smaller tents and booths here, most with nothing to show their purpose. No, here's one. Madame Ozra. Fortunes told, truths revealed. You will be astonished. Astonishment seems more attractive than confusion and mild sexual embarrassment. He raises the flap and peers inside. In the light of an oil lamp, a woman in almost comically appropriate attire sits facing him across a small table. Madame Ozra has a torrent of black hair, shot with a streak of silver, tied back with a red bandana. Gold dangles from her ears, adorns her throat and wrists and fingers. Above a low-cut white bodice her neck is graceful, her head small, its features well defined. She looks at him with glittering dark eyes, and her full lips open. "Come in or bugger off, mate. You're letting in a bloody draught." Reassured by this friendly greeting, he enters, lets the tent flap fall behind him. It muffles the last vestiges of the music that continued to play after he left the Wonders tent. The woman gestures impatiently. "Park your arse, pal. I'm knocking off at midnight, whether we're finished or not." He pulls up a rickety, straight-backed wooden chair and sits facing her. Her hands are long-fingered, shapely, the nails perfectly manicured. On the table in front of her is a deck of cards. The back of the top card is decorated with an abstract pattern of curves and circles that almost make a coherent picture. He finds himself staring at this pattern until she puts her hand in front of his face. "Cross me palm with silver, mate. Don't you know anything?" Smiling, he rummages for his cash. Unsure of how much to give her, he dumps all of it, including the note, into her palm. She doesn't even look at the money, merely whisks it away under the table. "Last of the big spenders," she mutters. Then, with a sour smile, "Right, eyes down for a full house. Cut and shuffle." She shoves the deck over to him, and he tries to obey her command. Under her gaze, he's clumsy, but he manages to rearrange the cards and put them back in front of her. She takes a deep breath, then deals the top 5 cards in a row across the green baize table. He pauses, and she jabs impatiently with a finger at the card furthest to his left. "Turn the first one over, then." He does as he's told, and exposes the face of the card. At first he can't quite grasp what he's seeing. He is familiar with the tarot, but this card looks nothing like the variants he's seen. It shows 3 people, 2 men and a woman in vaguely medieval dress. They're apparently engaged in some kind of celebration, sitting at a table laden with food and drink. "The 3 of lies," she says. "Somebody's been a bit naughty. Next." He almost objects to her abrasive manner at this point, but she's so imperious he remains silent and turns over the second card. "Whoa!" she exclaims, leaning back with a jingle of jewellery. "The knave of depravity, you dirty little bugger! What have you been up to then, eh?" This time he does object. "I didn't come here to be insulted." The words hang in the air between them as she looks up from the cards. The slight hissing from the oil lamp suddenly becomes very loud. He cannot meet her eye. "Turn over the middle card," she says, in a voice that brooks no further protest. "It will show us the heart of the matter." He turns the card over and drops it when he sees the picture, so that the card lies askew. "One of the greater arcana," she says, with what might be approval of a sort. "The murderer." This is a cheap trick," he splutters and starts to get up. Her tawny hand shoots out and grabs his wrist. She's strong, or perhaps he's become feeble. How long since he last ate? Since he last slept? She forces his hand down onto the fourth card. "No point in going now the show's nearly over," she says, almost gently. "Let's see what fate has in store, darling, shall we?" He cannot stay half risen for any longer, and collapses back into the chair, which creaks. She releases him, and he considers overturning the table, fleeing out into the night. But he can't be sure he could even lift the table, and fears his legs would betray him, leave him floundering on the carpeted floor of the tent. He turns over the penultimate card, lays it down with a slight snapping noise. The picture is almost familiar, but not quite. The hanged man, but not as usually depicted. "You've got to respect the classics," she says, and this time the approval in her voice is clear. "The suicide." "This can't lie in my future," he insists. "There must be some way to put it right. Something I can do." "Last card," she replies. "Last card, little man." He makes no move. He feels an overwhelming, if childish, desire to thwart her, but it does no good. She deftly flips the card with the first and middle fingers of her right hand. "Take a look," she says, nodding at it. "You hardly ever see this one. Take a look. Look at the last card." Despite his repugnance for her slick hocus-pocus, he cannot resist leaning closer. The card seems to be blank, a dark grey rectangle framed with white. Then he sees a hideous face looming out of the darkness, a visage with bulging eyes, sunken cheeks, and an imbecile, drooling mouth. He flinches, turns his head away. "Come on, face up to it," she says, and picks up the card, holds it before his face. It is a mirror, of course. "No!" He is already out of the tent, stumbling across the well-trodden turf, tripping over a guy rope. He falls, turns his ankle, hurts his wrist, and is badly winded. Whimpering, he tries to stand up. A dark figure appears, moving with silent grace through the neon glow. Behind Zora, the squarely built Barker looms. "Not too late," says the tattooed lady, reaching down to take his hand. "Come and join us. You will be one of the attractions." "Come and see the living dead man," booms the Barker, as if to encourage him. "His foulest deed was committed in a fairground, just like this. See the punishment fit the crime." "No!" he shouts again, and limps away. In front of him Madame Osra appears, taller than he expected. Her jewellery clinks and tinkles as she raises her arms to bar his way. "No future for you this way, sunshine," she says, "and everything closes at midnight. Better hurry." "Yes," he mutters, determined now simply to leave the fairground, regardless of what may lie outside. He tries to run away from the fortune-teller, the Barker, the ink-black woman, but at the same time keep the big wheel behind him. Somehow they always head him off, prevent him from getting outside the rows of attractions. Eventually he's crying in despair, the pain in his damaged ankle growing worse. Then, ahead of him, looms a black shape that offers hope. It is a house, or at least a normal building of some kind, too permanent to be a tent. He staggers up the 3 steps to the door and lifts his good hand to pommel on it, but it opens when he does, and he tumbles into a corridor. "Just in time," says a friendly voice. "Thought you weren't going to make it. Let's go, it's nearly midnight." A tall, spare figure is standing at his elbow. He can't see the other's face, but it seems pale, with deep eye sockets. The tall stranger's manner is warm, familiar. It occurs to him that he might have finally found a friend. Gasping, breathless from so much unaccustomed exertion, he allows the stranger to lead him to the inner doorway, through it into what seems to be a rather old-fashioned living room. A single candle flickers on a bracket above the vast, dark fireplace. A sudden thought, insane yet utterly compelling, fills his mind. Is this home? Am I home? He asks. Of course it is, the stranger says. Right, let's get you hooked up. Before he can ask what this means, the tall man effortlessly lifts him well above shoulder height. He thrashes his limbs impotently as the stranger attaches him to some kind of metal frame. A chandelier flickers briefly, and in that fleeting glimmer he can finally make out the face of his supposed rescuer. He screams. There is no face, not strictly speaking. A true face requires some flesh on the bone. The hideous being glides away. His victim is left hanging by the door in the quaint room, with its skeins of cobweb and drifts of dust. Even in his confused and terrified condition, he feels these details have a fake look, very much the stuff of the carnival-haunted house. He hears voices approaching, cheerful, careless. The great double doors of the room swing open, and facing him a group of people enter. They are speaking, but somehow he can't make out their words. It's not as if they're speaking in a foreign tongue, but in a mishmash of syllables that could make no sense in any language. Ancient clanking machinery hurls him forward, flying him towards the party, across the room, his limbs flailing in pain and panic. Their cries are almost as loud as his. He gives them a satisfactory fright. Their screams become laughter then, and they move on to the next room. The machinery pulls him back into place, in preparation for the next party, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next.